dossier. In the beginning of July, KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Mkwanazi implicated higher-ranking officials, including Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, in obstructing justice and shielding suspects linked to political killings within the country. That brings us to our very first slide. To understand the full impact of these claims, we must trace them back to their origins, the seed which was sown in May 2018 with the assassination of ANC activist Msawenkosi Mchunu Manqatha in Pietermaritzburg. These are some of the accusations Mkwanazi made. Lieutenant General Mkwanazi in KwaZulu-Natal, Minister of Police Senzo Mchunu, obstruction of justice, Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya, stalling investigations. You know that particular allegations that dockets were piling up and gathering dust in his office. Brown Mkhotsi, who campaigned for the CR17 campaign in the Northwest Province, organized crime links. You'd remember those particular connections of those communications between him and Vusimuzi Cat Matlala. Vusimuzi Cat Matlala shielded despite murder charges. Vusimuzi Cat Matlala shielded despite murder charges. Katiso Molefe gained access to over 120 dockets. Katiso Molefe, Julius Malema mentioned this particular name, how General Libya, he assumes Julius Malema spoke to Molefe on the phone, gained access to over 120 dockets.
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm still very crook anyway. Sorry about my voice, but I wanted to post and say something. As a synthetic chemist, I was trying to solve problems, breaking down molecule puzzles step by step. But recently, actually, I found myself using those same analytical skills to piece together something far more sinister. The collapse of public trust and safety in South Africa. What the PC Lieutenant Mkwanazi just revealed, it is a missing reagent. What he revealed was a missing reagent. The one that exposes why our institutions are failing and how deep this reaction goes when they do fail. And this is not just South Africa. It would apply even here in Australia. It could apply in any place where the institution fails. So in Chemist, if every action fails, you don't blame the beaker. Instead of saying, oh, the beaker is the problem, you trace the mechanism. The problem isn't just crime. It's systemic protections of criminals. Gandam Conan didn't just speak of a police commissioner. He spoke like a whistleblower. A whistleblower who's just been watching the reaction pathway of a state turning toxic. His statement that police and judiciaries are entangled in this criminality, to me, it was discovering that your solvent, the supposed neutral medium solvent that, had trying to do my chemist reaction, is contaminated. That was like that to me as a chemist. It was like, okay, discovering that, okay, my solvent is contaminated. When it's contaminated, you can't decontaminate it. You just have to throw it away. And you safely get rid of it. Dispose of it. Safely dispose of it. Because you don't want to dispose it in the critical areas where it can actually contaminate your environment. That's why you need to dispose of it safely. And this is what we had here in this saga of Vusimuzi Cat Matlala. I refer to him as a catalyst. I've got a board here that I've written down. Say Vusimuzi Cat Matlala is my catalyst. Because in synthetic chemists, the catalysts they accelerate the reaction. They can either accelerate, they make it faster, makes your reaction to go ahead. That's what we accelerate the reaction. It can be good or bad, depending how you look at it. So this is person, Vusimuzi, Kat Matlala, wasn't just another entrepreneur as you refer to, or businessman, which I don't know why you're referring to him to businessman because there's nothing businessy here. Um, so his involvement in healthcare tenders and chain reaction that followed led to these supply shortages, and I've been watching that. Crowded hospitals, preventable deaths, shows us that consequences of criminal network in procurement of critical infrastructure can be infiltrated by criminals and lead to issues, public health, and collapse of systems. If corruption is a chain reaction, then tender was a trigger. And the lack of response from the government, that's not oversight. It's by design. They've designed it this way. You know, sometimes reactions doesn't proceed because you are missing a single intermediate. No, it just doesn't proceed. Um, it can, yeah, because it could mean that, yeah, there's something missing in it. Mkwanazi's allegations gave a coherent to what I've been observing and I've long suspected. And I think many of you South Africans would have suspected for a very long time living into that. So we suspected? We suspected that safety issues aren't addressed, why corruption thrives, why persecution stall. I mean, you just had a trial, 10-year trial. Who has a 10-year trial? How can you have a 10-year trial? Normally, trials, they end about 6, 8 weeks to 12, at least 12 weeks. 10-year trial? Holy moly. Yeah, that on itself, it just tells you how deep this thing is entrenched in the South African society. You know, so this emergence of this mafia state is a very serious one. Because I look at it as, as having an inorganic compounds with hidden instability that can explode under pressure. Working with that, in organic compounds that you didn't know that they had some instability, and then you put it in the pressure and it explode. That's what it's looked like to me. The system still looks like constitutional democracy on the surface, but we're seeing uh, these kinetics of a mafia state. What I mean by kinetic of mafia state is that you got contracts awarded to loyalty rather than merit. Have a nickname cat be a president to award a critical contract, healthcare contract. Institutions that are really are being paralyzed from inside. What's the key reagents? The key reagents here is having an honest cops, judges, journalists being neutralized. When you have honest, hardworking cops with integrity being neutralized, when you have citizens being afraid to say, no, we don't want this, because they're afraid there'll be consequences. And then you do have the Freedom Charter. They tell you, how can you have a Freedom Charter if you cannot speak freely? How can you have a Freedom Charter if you can detour the city? You can't go to Johannesburg City. You can avoid a Joburg City. You don't have a freedom of movement. The mere fact that you're afraid to go to that area, that tells me on that it's also a barrier that you do not have the freedom of movement. You've been actually restricted. So Like I said, on the surface, looks like it's a constitutional democracy. And when you're seeing underneath the kinetics of mafia state, what Intlaham Mkwanazi exposed are heat being added to an already unstable mix. The unstable mixture that I have in my lab, just putting heat in it, there's warning signs were there. Now the reaction slows to critical mass, as we say in Chemist. I know you can't just patch broken process, and most chemists will tell you you just can't patch it. You need to rebuild it with poor 100% components, not just have 50% purity, 100% purity. If South Africa wants to escape this mafia state trajectory, we need more whistleblowers like Mkwanazi, more investigations into people like Kat Matlala, and a public that refuses to accept contaminated system as a norm. Language. What do we name things? I know just naming someone who's done this stuff like Kat Matlala as a businessman, it's an insult, really. But that kind of thing, you should be outraged. And there's someone who's called, businessman, and the businessman that gets money, people gets money. This contract that don't employ people, and you have high unemployment as a result of that. That employ people who shouldn't be there, and then underpay them. That's why they're employing illegal people, because to underpay, not to pay them the minimum wage. It's bad. That is this. It is the catalyst of mafia state. The formula for justice does exist, but someone needs to run the reaction.